What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time, as always. Today, we welcome along a actor, writer, and theatre maker, and in Miss Chloe Wade. And let's take a moment to introduce Chloe and the amazing work she's doing right now. So, as an actor, Chloe trained at the International School of Screen Acting and the Central School of Speech and Drama. With over 10 years of working in film, TV, and theatre, she is perhaps best known for playing Joanne Grantham in BBC Doctors and the lead role in independent film Honeycomb Lodge, which won the Best Film at the Delhi International Film Festival. And recently, she appeared alongside Helen Mirren in The Secret Life of Ophelia. As a writer, she is alumna of the actor-writer course as a supported writer of the Sheffield Theatre's Bank Cohort, I can't read my own writing there, current reigning champion of the Birmingham Rep Theatre's Monologue Slam with her self-penned comedy, May I Take Your Order? And as a theatre maker, she's the artistic director of her own production company, Chloe Wade Productions Limited, and is currently on tour across the regions with her brand new play, As She Likes It, a play exposing the sexual harassment in Hollywood dating back to the 1920s. A review of that, which I wrote, is down below in the description via Upper Circle. Partnered with her Sheffield cohort and the Papa Tango's producing course, that was for As She Likes It. And I reviewed the show with Upper Circle, and you can find that down below, as well as links to Chloe's website for more information about her tour information, agent details, etc. But without further ado, Chloe, hello.
Brilliant. Hello. Thanks for having me, Oliver.
No, my pleasure. How you been?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. We are in week 3 of our 7-week tour at the moment, and we've just had a few days off. We're in lovely sunny Middlesbrough.
Mm.
And just in case those that aren't watching it on YouTube and they just hear this, I'm actually not being sarcastic. It is really sunny outside up here in Middlesbrough.
Yeah, if anyone Apple and Spotify, go over to YouTube. Chloe, she's not lying. It's beautiful out there today. So
See for yourself. It's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
so sun in Middlesbrough, but what do they think of next? Uh, with every guest, we start at the very beginning, as Dylan Thomas says, to begin at the beginning. Where did it all come from you, Chloe? Come for you, Chloe. The love of acting, writing, and being a theatre maker. Where did it all come from?
Ooh, for as long as I can remember, I have always wanted to get into acting. It's been something that's just deep down felt just so much a part of who I am, but I kept it very much a secret. I was very quiet about my love of acting. No one in my family is an actor or even remotely involved in the industry in any way. So for me, it was just something that I secretly had to myself until I took up the courage to tell my family about it. But I kind of always watched the old Hollywood movies. That's what I grew up on, and had that sense of escapism watching people like Lucille Ball and Betty Davis, Deborah Carr, for example. And then more modern films like Ken Loach's films, a completely different type of escapism. That was just much more naturalistic and much more of the world that I knew and saw around me. But I just saw so much value in what films were doing in terms of telling people stories and people that, just normal people going about their lives, paying their taxes, raising a family, whatever they might be doing, and introducing their story to an audience. And I thought there's so much worth in that. I want to do that. So I really can't remember a certain age or a certain time in my life. It's just always been there in terms of I've always wanted to act. And then the writing, to be completely honest with you, and everything else has just come out of necessity. It's come out of giving me more autonomy over my own career and creating roles for myself. So probably that emerged in the past 5 to 8 years. Yeah.
Fantastic. What would you say was your favorite classic film? Because you listing off all those things there reminded me of. I'm a big fan of Rear Window and stuff like that. You know, the classics. You know, which one's your favorite?
Yeah, I do like a bit of Hitchcock. I mean, honestly, horror is my favorite genre, and I love Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. So that's Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, and that's my mum's favorite film, both of my nana's favorite films, and we would watch it all together. I probably watched that film way too young than what I should have watched it, but that I think is just iconic and still stands a test of time. There are still moments a bit melodramatic, I have to admit, but
Yeah.
really the essence of that story still holds true today, right? It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. What about Carrie? You watch Carrie?
Yes, of course. Carrie's
Mm.
great. I actually, I didn't even mind the remake. I'm so disappointed they had to do a remake, but Carrie is phenomenal. I do like Hitchcock myself as well. I like it's funny. I know we're going to be talking about this later on in terms of like the Me Too movement and everything. It's such a shame Josh Whedon did this movie, but I love Cabin in the Woods because I thought that was an absolutely great horror film as well. So there's just so many of them, and I think that's what's so underrated about the genre.
Yeah.
People just see all the rubbish horrors, but there's so many different facets to it, and it really deals with everyday life and everyday horrors like jealousy and grief and things like that, which are just so powerful and very underrated tool to talk about serious issues, horror, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a lot of comparisons between like the old horror, the kind of some could be quite dated now because obviously the technology they had available at the time. But where do you sort of stand on like modern horror, where they've got all the technology and all the fake bloods just pouring out of every, and the screams and everything? So what do you think of? Like, I suppose the classics, they always have that lovely quality to them. But where do you stand on like modern to contemporary? Old to
I think I know what you mean, Oliver, don't worry.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
Wrong word, sorry.
simplicity. I'm really not bothered about all the new high-tech stuff that they have. I love a good inventive camera angle. I love even a good just handheld, even it doesn't have to be high tech or anything like that. And in terms of actual horror, like I say, if you're just talking about society maybe and politics in everyday horror, that's scary to me, not the actual special effects on top of it.
Mm. I think one thing that because Hammer's kind of making a comeback now because Hammer sort of disappeared for a few years, and then they came back with. Have you seen The Woman in Black, the Daniel Radcliffe one?
Yes,
Yeah, I
I
thought
have, yeah.
that was wonderful. It was wonderful. What did you think?
Very scary. Like I was scared by it and the jump scares and everything like that. I have to say, Hammer horror isn't like one of my favorite genres of horror, but I do appreciate it for what it is, and I know it's
Okay.
got a massive cult following. But yeah, out of all the different genres, it's not one that I'm particularly like, oh, I just love a bit of Hammer horror. It's a bit too much for me sometimes, that.
Yeah, amazing. So we're gonna talk about your play in a bit, which I know you're currently on tour on there in Middlesbrough. But just one quick fanboy question for me, just before we get into that, which is in the intro you worked alongside Helen Mirren recently. What was it like working with theatre, film royalty, acting royalty?
Well, you might be a bit disappointed, Oliver, because this was something that we did over lockdown. So I never
Okay.
got to meet Helen Mirren in person
Well,
in real life.
well,
I know it's such a shame. Everything was done like over Zoom or recorded like separately. We actually recorded our own stuff as an actor and then sent it into it was done at Greenwich Theatre as part of the production. And then they edited it all together. And we had an actual screening of it afterwards, after the lockdown. But unfortunately, I think Helen Mirren was in LA. I think she's based now. So never actually got to meet her, which is really unfortunate. Yeah. But I still throw out the fact that I worked with her because technically I did, just
it
never,
is.
unfortunately, met her.
Yeah, just it was remote, but hey, we worked together. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, just quickly, I mentioned that. So, you're current reigning champion of the Birmingham Rep Theatre's Monologue Slam. I'm guessing that's like a competition or something like that. So, tell me about your comedy. May I take your order? What's that all about?
That is based on my experiences waitressing and all those jobs you work alongside. Mine was hospitality, and it's inspired by all the things that I wanted to say to customers, but you can't because you just have to keep a smile on your face all the time. And that's pretty much it was a 3 minute monologue just based around all the things, the crazy things that customers would come out with and expect from you as a waiter.
Yeah,
So I loved writing that. It was just my release. All those 10 years working in hospitality to be able to put into a monologue was just the best. And yeah, Monologue Slam is such a great competition for any actors out there. They really encourage you to write your own monologues, but you can do published plays, new plays, classics. And there's a 1 minute round and a 3 minute round, and it's a brilliant showcase. That brought so many things for me from doing Monologue Slam. And that was kind of slowly how I started getting into writing because doing a 3 minute monologue didn't feel that big a deal for me. And then I could slowly make it bigger into a short play and then do something else and then eventually make a full length play. So it's just a good way to start to kind of dip your toe into the writing world, I think.
Absolutely. I've worked in hospitality for years as well. You know, it's a good thing to sort of keep the money coming in. So it's affording like trips to set B&Bs, you know, the train journeys into London for the auditions and stuff like that. So it does serve a purpose, but it's not my life. That's to be absolutely clear. Just out of curiosity, what was one of the worst things that a customer said to you, and is that in the monologue?
I couldn't fit the worst thing in there. But I mean, like the most embarrassing one, there's this awful businessman who used to come into this steakhouse that I used to work with, and he used to
Mm,
bring like all his clients in, and he
mm,
just used to really berate me and just treat me like shit. And I
mm.
remember he came in and he ordered a latte, and we've gone on these barista training courses and everything. Like it was quite a high-end restaurant, so I knew how to make a latte, and I brought it over and gave it to him, and he was like, "What's this?" And I was like, that's a latte. And he was like, do me a favor, Google latte and see what comes up. And then he got on his phone and actually Googled latte and looked at the images. And mine looked identical to the images of what he was showing me. And I just pointed it out and said, look, that looks exactly like mine. And he was like, no, no. And he's just started shouting at me in front of this client who was obviously feeling like really awkward.
Mm.
The guy was about like he was twice my age, so it didn't look good that he was just berating this 20 something girl. And I mean, I look about 12 as well, so that didn't help. Um, and yeah, it was just awful. He was just such a vile person. And I had customers come up to me afterwards and just be like, it's all right, like you're absolutely fine. And it was great because people tipped me extra because he was so mean to me and
Oh,
just
good.
absolutely shouting. Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't add that latte bit in there. But it sticks with me. The anger is still there,
Oh yeah.
definitely.
No, no. I mean, and one thing I used to think is if someone's being rude to you, you think, what? Why? Why? It's just, in your case, it's just a latte, mate. It's just a coffee. If you're not happy, Starbucks is around the corner.
Exactly. Yeah. It's such a shame. And he would do things like I came back once with this great someone told me to do a great like retort to him because he
Mm,
used to say, do you know who I am? And obviously
of
like I had no idea who he was
course.
because I don't
Yeah.
work in business. But then someone was like, oh, just like throw out there, excuse me, everyone, can somebody help? Like this man's forgotten who he is, as if like he's lost his memory. And I did it once, and it was the best thing, and his face just like dropped. And I have to say, making him feel like the idiot like seemed to work, but I don't generally do that. I tend to treat people kindly and
Yeah, of
not
course.
and how I would like to be treated. But it was a great retort to come out with. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because for some people, they need to be put in their place, you know, because I've had conversation with people like that. I'll tell you a very quick story, if I may. I know this is about you, but just humor me just for 1 second. So I got a friend who used to work as a hairdresser, and he still does it every now and then, but he set up this place with his partner at the time, and she got this lady in, and she was with him. He was with her for about an hour. You know, colors, styling, everything, exactly what she wanted. And at the end of it, he showed her the back, and he went, "So what do you think?" And this lady apparently just looked at him and went, "I think it looks like a lump of shit." And I thought,
Oh no.
I remember him telling me that. I said, "What did you do?" And he said, "I tell you what, I put the mirror down, I got her out the chair, pushed her to the door, and said, look, don't ever come back. I don't want your money. You've annoyed me that much. I'm not going to charge you. Get out and don't ever come back." And I thought,
Good for him.
and yeah, and I thought,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
I think that story
That's
is what,
um,
yeah, like your story there, like, essentially you have to say to people, do you know what? I don't want your money. Just get out because you're so rude. Get out. I don't know why you're
yeah.
this way. Yeah. But God, we could talk
Yeah.
about that for ages, couldn't we? But
I know. Horror stories. But I think that's great because I think then you don't it otherwise it affects you too much. You just take it away with you and you start feeling like, but you did the right thing by just being like, nah, that you're not gonna affect me. You've
mm,
taken an hour of my time, but that's all you're gonna take.
mm,
You can go now. I'm never gonna
yeah,
see you again. Brilliant.
exactly. Fantastic. Anyway, look, we could talk about that for ages, but yeah, let's jump into your work, Chloe, hence why we're here. So, as she likes it, has so it's a beautiful, beautiful play. I was lucky enough to see it at the Greenwich Theatre a few weeks ago. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's currently on tour at the moment. So check out Chloe's website down below. Tour dates, etc., are in there. And I encourage everyone to go and see this play because it shines a light on I think a lot of people sort of my age and a bit younger will be aware of the Me Too movement that happened a few years ago. And, Harvey Weinstein and, all these stories about Gwyneth Paltrow and all these people started to come out. But sadly, the rabbit hole goes a lot deeper than that. And it goes right back to the 1920s. And specifically, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is your play is based on Patricia Douglas's incident at MGM party in 1937. And she tried to bring her prosecutors to justice, but eventually, and sadly so, the case was swept under the carpet. The prosecutors, the participant, the person who did it, or people who did it, got off scot-free, and sadly were never brought to justice. So, but enough for me. Tell me about this play. Where was the first idea, the first spark of inspiration? Where did it come from?
Well, like I said, I've always loved old Hollywood and I've always been fascinated by that era and why people tend to see it through a rose-tinted lens. Because I definitely still do. We all know like the horror stories, or assume know the horror stories behind like Wizard of Oz when you're hearing all the treatment of Judy Garland, for example. But every Christmas I'll watch Wizard of Oz and love it and everything like that.
Yeah,
I'm fascinated by all these beautiful people and beautiful gowns and passionate embraces, but the real deep underbelly,
yeah,
seedy underbelly beneath it. So that was something that I was always really interested in, and that juxtaposition. And
yeah.
then during lockdown, I was lucky enough to be on furlough. So I had a lot of time on my hands. People were always telling me, write your own stuff. And I was like, I don't have time. Like, this is exhausting. Stop telling me to write things. Like, I'm working multiple jobs and thinking about acting on top of that is enough. So don't tell me to think about writing. Like,
Yeah,
it's not what I do. Anyway, I finally did have the time and I was like, you know what? Okay, let's just do it. Let's write something. And Camilla Whitehill is a playwright, and she was doing this free course over Zoom for actors who wanted to write their first play. And it was completely free. I got a spot on that, and that kind of was the push that I needed. And it's just the ripples of Me Too Times Up were still happening. So I kind of went down this wormhole. It's not a great wormhole to be down, but like Sarah Everard had just happened as well, that her case over lockdown, and people were discovering about her story. And that's when I came across the story of Patricia Douglas. It's just by doing a big deep dive into sexual harassment, Me Too, Time's Up, Hollywood, and somehow I came across this Vanity Fair article, which is amazing. I think it's one of the things that will come up first if you Google Patricia Douglas's name, and thought this is going to be my line throughout the play. This is my protagonist, and this is the story that I want to tell because it's so similar to what is happening now, 90 years in the future. But nobody knows this woman's name, including myself, someone who prides herself on knowing everything about old Hollywood. So that's kind of where it started. That's the inception of it all.
yeah. And you really sort of captured it brilliantly. So it's you and a cast of five, correct? Is it? Am I right? So
Five of us all together. Yeah.
all together, yeah. And each of you have so you have characters. There are characters in the play, of course, but you don't have specific names. You kind of alternate between different things. I think some of them are called. So you've got like a leading lady, a sex symbol, a comedy queen, and a sort of a few other damsel in distress. I think was another one as well, wasn't it? So all of them sort of integrate into various assets of Hollywood. The kind of typical image, and you sort of present them in a way that in situations that unfortunately were happening at the time. And so what made you want to go through that angle, sort of be kind of not ambiguous with characters, that's the wrong word, but kind of giving like specific names and specific situations to these people?
Yeah, well, I was interested in this idea, these stereotypes that we're put in. I found them particularly myself. There's a lot of roles that I've played that don't have names.
Mhm.
The girl next door, which funnily enough is the character that I play in As She Likes It. Or I could be the girlfriend, the school girl, shop girl, just so many characters without names. And I just thought, what's the classic archetypes of old Hollywood? And they're those, the ones that you just listed. So there was that element of it, of representing an archetype, but also because I wanted to subvert that and see what the truth behind this archetype is, but also because of the fact that they represent thousands upon, well, hundreds of thousands of women. So I didn't want to give them specific names. And Girl Next Door is inspired by Patricia Douglas. She's also inspired by numerous people who've come forward with their Me Too Time's Up stories. So that's another reason why they didn't have specific names as such, because I wanted to make them a bit more universal.
Yeah.
Because they do represent so many people. But yeah, the idea is that they take you through this journey of old 1937 Hollywood, and it's all seen through their eyes, until eventually, probably after the interval, it's a mix of old Hollywood and now. And the idea is hopefully you don't know the difference to when things are taking place, if they're taking place modern day 1937 Hollywood. And there is a point, it's quite Brechtian, the play. There is a point where the actors come out and say their own names as well, just making it again just a bit more universal and blurring the lines between what has actually happened and reality and what is happening in the play. It's, yeah, very Brechtian and fourth wall breaking, I think.
Yeah, it very much is. I think one thing I was very alerted to was the mixing of I think I wrote in the review. It's so it's live action obviously because it's on stage, but you also had there's a lot of verbatim in this theatre as well. In this piece, you know, at various points, you actually get footage up from the 1920s all the way through to the present day of various cases and everything, and particularly some of them are movie clips of women being potentially harassed in front of the camera. Yeah, but they're in the film, but you can see that these actresses are very uncomfortable, and this scene is not comfortable to watch, particularly as modern audiences being a lot more aware of this thing. And I thought that was a really good way of anchoring it into what the play was all about and this stuff. What made you want to go down the path of like mixing the live action and the verbatim as well?
I just think it brings just that element of truth to it. I think some people can separate themselves and say, oh, you know what, it's just a story and it's just theatre. But
Mm,
having that element of verbatim and knowing actually this is what is happening. So we
yeah,
might be following a separate story, but this is based in truth and this is still happening now. It happened then. And I wanted to do the combination of screen and theatre because I love the old movies. So the screen element was always really important. I just think people just are a bit less aware, really, in terms of how dark old Hollywood was. The Shirley Temple footage we use in a
yeah,
scene from
yeah,
Baby Lights. And when you think of Shirley Temple, you think of this cute little blonde girl doing the lollipop dance. And the stuff that we found on YouTube, I mean, it's just all there for you to see.
mm,
This little girl who, in one scene, 4 years old, saying about the fact that she's playing a prostitute and she's saying, "You can't afford me, I'm expensive." And that things on those kind of lines, and it's just absolutely gross and
yeah,
disgusting.
yeah,
And yes, sometimes people just need to see that because me telling people that they're like, nah, nah. But if you actually, it's there in front of you and you're watching it and you see it, we've had like reactions in the audience, like gasps and being like, what? And being like
mm,
completely shocked. And I do love that about the piece that hopefully it's kind of rewriting a bit of history that's always been there, but has just been overshadowed by the light, cute side of things.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. Because you know, there's a lot of the Me Too movement. For anyone who isn't aware of it, so the allegations about Harvey Weinstein came out, and a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon of people who were silenced, unfortunately, by these big production companies. And they started a campaign. It was on Twitter called #MeToo, where people came forward and told their own stories. And there was one film in particular, which I know you mentioned was part of your research process, which was She Said, with Kerry Mulligan and people like that, which I thought was really good. Sort of you were talking there because you saw the film, didn't you?
Yes, I did see the film. Yeah, and a
Yeah.
lot of actors also watched it and used it as part of their research. And the writer of that, I'm a fan of her work as well. So yeah, it was definitely a good film to watch in terms of research. But I know what you're going to ask me about next.
Yeah.
The people behind the film, right?
Yeah. Behind the film, you discovered that there was someone attached to the film who wasn't entirely innocent, and it was ironic considering the film that they were making.
Yeah, one of the producers it was. I think this is an industry thing. I don't think, if you were to ask members of the public, no one would bat an eyelid at this person, but they're quite a high profile um person in the industry. And yeah, they chose to produce the film, but it is kind of hush hush in the industry that they have a background in terms of um I would say violence or yeah, assault, not sexual violence, but domestic violence. So
Yeah.
it was just very interesting that they chose to put their name towards this as a kind of, it felt like a cover, a very convenient cover. I'm a
Mm.
good person. What I'm supporting this amazing cast of women. But yet the truth behind that. I've become a bit more, is it, what's the word? Just, I'm not as, it sounds bad to say it, positive. Yeah, I'm just a bit more negative about things now. I just tend to see things um, yeah, in a bit of a different lens in doing this play. And I just tend to ask the questions, why has someone chosen to do that? Instead of being like, oh, that's a great thing that that person's done that. And wow, they're an ally and they're championing women. And wow, now I tend to be like a more pessimistic approach as to, okay, so why are they doing that? Which is
Mm.
really bad. And you should never be like that. It's just, unfortunately, there's just so many people out there that, yeah, just have bad intentions behind things.
Yeah. And I think you highlight it brilliantly in the play. There's a couple of moments I just want to mention. There's a scene where one of the actors is being harassed simply because she is a little overweight. And sadly, that I think one of the things that you highlighted was that we look at Hollywood and there's this kind of perfect body, this perfect look, and if you don't have it, then you're not going to be successful, which is just total nonsense in every sense of the word. Uh, and so when you came across, because there's so many elements to Hollywood and Me Too and the Weinstein scandal and all that, how did you sort of go about finding those moments that particularly got a big kind of reaction from the audience, like that moment where an actress is being harassed just for being overweight?
Mm. There's quite a few that were right. They were really easy to find actually from reading. I read a book called Women versus Hollywood, which was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a great podcast, You Must Remember This, which is all about the darker side of old Hollywood. And just it's so interesting. The same things keep coming up, which is apart from sexism, it's racism, it's weight, it's hiding your sexuality and all those lavender marriages that were around at the time.
Mm.
And there's just so many of them. You think it's just few and far in between. And a lot of people would be like, let's go back to those good old days when men were men and women were women. It's like you really have no idea because it was exactly what it is like today, except people just couldn't talk openly about things.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so there was a lot around skin bleaching as well. And a great deal around hiding your ethnicity. Because as we know, Hollywood, particularly back then, was very whitewashed. I mean, you can still
Yeah.
argue that it is, but there's a lot more being said for diversity now, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it was a big surprise just finding how many stories that there are out there. I mean, hundreds of these stories. They're not one-offs at all, but they were the main ones that kept coming forward that I thought, am I talking about old Hollywood now, or is this right now? Because just a few years ago, you had Jennifer Lawrence talking about how she was in a naked lineup with lots of other actresses and was told to use that as motivation to lose weight because she was slightly larger than the other actresses. Like that was happening in old Hollywood. It's no, what has changed? Yeah,
Oh my
nothing.
God. Jesus Christ. But God, how do you? Yeah, God, that is bad. I'm just curious to know: was there any stories that, like you mentioned earlier about your monologue? May I take your order? That you couldn't fit like the worst thing into it. Was there a story that you read which sadly didn't make it into the play that you would have liked to have put in, but because of structure or whatever it is, you couldn't use it?
Yeah, there were a lot of those. And also I had to think as a writer as well as particularly as a white writer, what I wanted to kind of talk about. Like I mentioned, the issues around skin bleaching and things like that. There
Mm-hmm.
were so many of those stories, but I felt like as a white writer, it's not my place to write about those stories. But yeah, I wanted to mention them because otherwise I'm doing my own form of whitewashing by completely removing them from the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so much around misogynoir, and that type of thing. There was there's a great documentary called Girl 27, which is around Patricia Douglas,
Okay.
and there's another woman in that who we mentioned as the name at the end. I'm gonna look this up just in case I get this wrong. I
Yeah, of
think
course.
it's Eloise, but there's a great story in there where her son is kind of watching her old movies because they were taken away from MGM or whatever studio it was at the time, because she came forward with her story after Patricia Douglas. She was very much inspired by it, and she came forward with her own assault story. And
Right.
because of that, her complete filmography had been taken off the studio, um, completely erased. Her whole CV had just been erased, and her whole life had just been erased. So much so that her son then never got to see his mum perform or hear her sing until this documentary where they find old archive footage of her, and he's there listening to her sing and dance, and it's just so beautiful. So
Wow.
that was another beautiful story.
Wow.
And they're the ones that we know about, Oliver. Like there's so many that obviously we don't know about because
Yeah.
people didn't feel they were able to come forward because you lose so much.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so many. That I wish we could just keep uh, talking about these stories because there's so much out there. But yeah, I do hope that it's not going to take another 90 years to still keep talking about these
Oh yeah.
stories. But I
I hope
do
not.
think it's important to be polite now because then hopefully
Yeah. I
that's
think that
it.
yeah, of course, and not taking anything away from your play at all. You know, you're really shining a light on women specifically, but of course, men have also been affected by this as well. You know, and you know, if I was to bring up a name which I used to be such a fan of, but now when I do say his name, it makes me feel a bit sick. Is of course Kevin Spacey, and
Yeah.
he was in charge of the old Vic, and the allegations that have come out. It was Anthony Rapp, I think his name was, made allegations. And just quickly, just throw this in. I actually, when I was at drama school, I was in a workshop with Michael Hoffman, the director, who's also been on the show, who worked with him, and they did a film about Gore Vidal, which still has not been cancelled as such, but it was due to be released on the week that Kevin Spacey's allegations came out, and since then it's been put in a vault somewhere. So all that hard work is just gone down the toilet because of one person. And yeah, and Michael talked about we had no trouble or anything, but then the fact that he tried to pass all that off. Do you remember the famous press release that he tried to pass it off for being gay?
Vaguely, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just, and I remember Michael said that was the worst press release in the history of mankind. His words, not mine. But then, and then other than that, people from the old Vic, men from the old Vic, came out and said that they'd had uncomfortable experiences with him. I read a story that he had candlelit dinners on the stage of the old Vic after hours with younger actors, promising them uh, the world, you know, theatre stardom, film stardom, but at a certain price. And yeah, it's, and all these things have come out, and like you say, the rose tinted glasses, you know, they've well and truly have been smashed by this point, and then suddenly you see the darker side to it as well. But yeah, but just to be clear, I'm not taking anything away from your play, and the women's stories and everything. They're absolutely important, of course, but it makes me sad also to know that it's also men have also been involved in this as well. And you read these stories. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a valid point. Like these issues, yes, categorically, statistically affect more women, but they're not specific to women. Um, they're universal and they're human, and everyone is affected by it. And yes, the Kevin Spacey trials were the biggest one. And as we know, that's he was found not guilty from those as well. So it just even today,
Unbelievable. Yeah.
it's
Unbelievable. Yeah.
it's a
Really sad.
massive in the industry. Just that power difference and what people are allowed to get away with, and just more needs to be done through our unions and through equity and through us ourselves as the industry, because we're all part of the industry. We all have a role to play.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it needs to stop. It's gone on too
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
Yes.
It should never have existed in the first place, not at all. But I tell you what, one thing you really highlighted really well is with your character, the girl next door. I think one of your lines in the play, which you wrote, is I've got it here somewhere. She said, I mean, you wrote it, so you'll correct me if I get this wrong. So you say that her line is like she came to Hollywood because she couldn't think of anything else she'd rather do than acting. She absolutely loves to act and she can't see herself doing anything else. But because of this, and I think this has been the case for, I think it is sadly the case with a lot of people, is that because they want to do it so much, these producers go, well, if you want to do it, you've got to do this. And they go, yeah, fine. But then in a way, they kind of hand their soul over in a way, or hand over their power, or however you want to call it, to these corrupt executives. And I think The Girl Next Door was, and by the way, you played it beautifully. By the way, your performance was really, really good. And you really captured the innocence and how that innocence was being threatened in a way. You and all the other girls, actually, when you were playing those innocent parts, about how easy it is. You see the lights, you see the fame, you see the stardom. I want to be part of that. But it comes at such a cost you don't realize until it's taken away. I mean, how much of that was in your thought process when you were writing?
Yeah. Oh, good. You're
Oh,
back. I thought you
okay,
were gone
okay, there we go. It's all good.
then. Yeah, I think you put so much focus on what this person in a high position of power is telling you. And if this is what they're telling you,
Yeah.
with like Weinstein, he would use stories of all these actresses that he'd supposedly slept with that
Mm,
apparently he hadn't at all, but he would use these big names as a way to be like, well, so and so's done it and she's won an Oscar and so and so. So you start to think, oh well, that's just, I guess, the way that it is. And I think it's less about making that decision to either do something or not do something. I think whatever choice you decide to make, that's up to you and it's your choice. I think the point is that kind of position of power should never be abused in that way anyway. And that situation should never, that that question or that what's the word that I'm looking for? I cannot articulate myself today. I'm a writer, Oliver, and I just can't find the words sometimes, and it's
don't
very
worry.
frustrating.
Don't worry.
That proposition should never happen in the first place.
Mm,
But yeah, there's just so much. I tend to think of it as like so many wolves out there, and so much innocence that's really being destroyed. And it's a good thing to be innocent. I think people kind of look down on it and think it's a naivety or something like that. There's an element. Why is it not good to be innocent? Why can't we as a society keep a bit of innocence? Because yeah, the sad fact is you get to a certain age, some people before that age, and you've just lost all of that, and
mm.
you just lose a bit of yourself, and that chips away at your soul. Um, yeah, it's that being said, though, I mean, the reason I wanted to write this play, I do think there's a lot of wonderful things in the industry. I wouldn't be in the industry if I didn't love it so much. You know,
Yeah,
there's so many like wonderful people and great work happening. It's just people look to the industry as a forward-thinking place, as something that's ahead, that makes changes. And unfortunately, you know, we found through Me Too Times Up that in many ways it's quite a backwards industry.
yeah,
Um, yeah, there's a lot to be hopeful for because there's a lot of people who want change. I mean, we all want change. Surely we all agree that the issues brought in the play should not be happening and that they're bad. So we all agree on that. So it's just about actually doing something and bringing it forward and taking action to make sure that we're not talking about these same things in a few years and the next generation of people coming through have a much better industry and playing field to work with.
yeah, yeah. Couldn't say it better. Fantastic. You mentioned about that. Actually, no. Before we get into that, so tell me about specifically. We'll take a break from just the scandal part. You know, when you go down this rabbit hole, you realize just how dark it really is, and sometimes you have to sort of come back. So tell me about. So you started writing the play over lockdown, and I'm always curious because I'm actually writing a play myself actually at the moment, and so I'm curious to know like the writing process in a way because I remember thinking at a time how can you, I remember thinking, how can you write a book? How can you write a play? Where do you get all these words? How do they all fit together? So yeah, how did you do that? Or how did you discover, well, A, how did you discover writing? And B, what was your writing process like specifically on As She Likes It?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still thinking, even after I've written this play, I'm still thinking, so how do I write the next play? And how does that start and everything? I very much discovered it as I was just writing it. And like I said, I had the course from Camilla Whitehill at the same time, which I found massively helps me. Having deadlines, having something to work towards. Otherwise, I will just procrastinate and I'll never write anything. But it's just started from, I think lots of different snippets of different scenes came to me in different places. So I listen to a lot of music, and the music inspires a lot of what I write. And I remember watching Drag Race, for example, and there was this lip sync to Donna Summer's Last Dance. And from listening to that, I was like, I came up with there's a screwball comedy queen character who has a comedy routine throughout the play that's repeated. And that just came from listening to that song, for example. So that started there. Then I always had this iconic image of the Columbia Pictures woman, how the play starts. I always wanted to do something around that because I saw the picture behind of the model who was literally in a bed sheet and holding up a desk lamp, and the difference between that and what you see, the beautiful iconic image on screen. So I had my beginning on that. I had the end because I knew I wanted it to be a very empowering end and series of names of people who were affected. And I had one kind of middle scene. And then I came across the story of Patricia Douglas, and I was like, right, I need to find a line to connect these all
Mm,
together.
yeah.
My vomit draft was essentially like probably just a series of skits or cabaret interludes, that kind of thing. And then I was paired with an amazing dramaturg called Lizzie Watson. And I would recommend anyone, if you're writing a play, to try and get a dramaturg on board because she massively helped me figure out what is the whole story of this? How
Mhm.
can this fit together? What can this structure look like? Because
Yeah.
still structure drives me mad.
Oh, tell me about it.
Um, it's just yeah, horrendous. But I think once you've actually written that vomit draft and got that out, no matter how short it is, I mean, mine was probably like a one act play at that point. It might have been 30 pages, something like that. It wasn't a full play, but that's all I had. And that was literally my vomit draft. And then I was like, I need a mentor. I need a writing mentor. I think mentorship is very overlooked today, but it's such a valuable thing. So I wrote to my favorite writer, Morgan Lloyd Malcolm, and just dropped her an email. I'd invited her to see a show of mine that I was in. So luckily I already had an email, but I just kind of chanced my arm. I was like, I'm writing my first play. I need help. I'm still discovering about the type of writer that I am, but I know I'm passionate about this. It's very like your type of work. It's very feminism. Like I, I just could really do with some pointers and some help. And would you consider being my mentor? And thankfully she did. And honestly, I think that's been a real turning point as well, because every single draft then was sent to my mentor. She had a look over it, would give me feedback, would give me points on structure, on ideas, on questions, and all of that. And she literally looked over every single one, I think, from my vomit draft onwards. So that was a big help. And after that, I did a research and development. I managed to get some Arts Council funding. So it's literally been going on 5 years for me to write this play. From when it first started to now, it's changed massively. And I think the main things have been the support network that I've had of someone who didn't know how to write a play, had done no writing courses, didn't go to uni to do any writing. I just kind of, the more you can get support of you, whether it be other writers to look over your work or a mentor or get some research and development. Sheffield Theatre's Bank Cohort was amazing because again, they did that. They had a dramaturgy session with me. Um, all of that, as much support as you can get, I would say apply for these schemes because without them, there's no way I would have been able to have what I have now on the page.
Mhm.
It was not just me, it was from all those people supporting me and helping me with it.
Yeah. It's funny because the process of writing, you know, you think you know, you hear these stories that people like wrote a play in a week or something like that, and it was like the next big thing. But you know, it takes time, this writing process, honestly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it massively does. And I'm so glad it took so long because
Hmm.
I thought I was ready like 2 years ago. I thought the script was ready, honestly. And then I just didn't get funding to tour it. And I was so gutted about it. But it's been a blessing in disguise because then since then it's taken on a whole life of its own. And it changes in the rehearsal process, having actors in. I was very much free. I put in the notes of the play, like, please improvise around it. It needs that energy and that playfulness. And the actors that we have on board just brought so much into it, which is now I've written into the script just from their improvisations of it. There's a scene, a filmmaker scene, which was well, not completely different. It had the same essence, but it was very different to when we got in rehearsals to when we finished rehearsals. And that was just through actors chucking themselves in and us just trying out different scenarios and see which one worked best. So it was still changing right up until press night, basically.
I suppose that's great because again, you read stories about the play going into rehearsals and things chop and change, and actors suggest lines and things like that. So I'm just curious, as a writer, you know, you've brought this play into the room. You know, you're very proud of it. You know, 5 years of work has gone into this, working with, was it Lizzie Watson you mentioned there, the dramaturg? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Lizzie Watson, and of course Morgan as well. You know, you feel like you've got this in a really, really good place. And it's like, this is your baby. You know, it is your baby, of course. You know, and I don't want any further changes to happen. It's all there. But an actor goes, "What about this?" And you go, "It's actually really good. I want to change that." How much leeway did you? Well, it sounds like you gave a lot of leeway to actors changing that in the room. How does that influence you as a writer?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think I was flexible with things. Also, our director, Tilly Vosborough, was really good at questioning things and bringing things up. I had to strike a balance because as much as I want people to be open with it and play with it and feel like, not to feel like, oh, the writer's in the room, I can't change that. I wanted them to be free in that way, but also I had to stick to my guns to things that I was really passionate about. And there were moments, where actors are brilliant because they question the character a lot. They think so much more about the character that I do as a writer. And they were questioning things that were rightly should be questioned, and I just didn't have the answers for them at that time. But I needed that to be in the script because it meant a lot. Um, so we just had to kind of find a balance. I had to find a way of, I guess, explaining what my reasoning was behind these things. And there's a moment as well, I think towards in the second act, that the director really wanted to cut and was a bit, I thought it might be a bit on the nose, but I was like, no, you know what? We've earned it by this point. Like, after everything that we've gone through, we've earned this moment. So I
Mm,
really had to like push for that. And I'm so, so glad that we did because I love it when it happens. Um, yeah, but it's a balance. It definitely is because you have to be open to what other people are saying because sometimes they are right and you can't just be in your own little lane all the time. But
yeah.
other times it's your baby and deep down what is what your play is saying. So yeah, you do have to fight sometimes to keep things in there. I've learned so much from doing this production. It's
Mm.
been the best possible thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine, you know, you writing this play, like you obviously you see all the lines of characters and you hear them in your head and stuff like that. But then when you get into the rehearsal room with actors actually saying your words and actually taking them off the page, I mean, that must be quite a feeling, you know, like hearing your universe just come to life, really.
It really is. And in the same vein of that, like there's moments in the script that I'm like, oh God, does that really work? And then you have an amazing actor read it and you're like, yeah, all you need is that actor to
Yeah,
100% believe in it, do what they do. And they're like,
yeah.
oh, it's no problem at all. They've got it like, yeah, it just brought a whole new level to it. I mean, I just have a whole different respect for actors and just coming in and taking my words and just elevating them just through the truthful way that they're saying them or the way that they've captured a character.
Mm.
It's it's a whole different level to just on the page.
Yeah, it's a whole different ball game, isn't it? I just want to just talk about one moment in the play in particular. It's just towards the end. For without, it doesn't give the play away to do too much. There's not a spoiler or anything, so it's not going to spoil anything for your audience in Middlesbrough tomorrow night or for the rest of the tour. But there's one scene in particular that really stuck with me, which was with one of your actors. I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. I'm so sorry. Krupa Patani. Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yes,
Okay,
Krupa. Yeah.
perfect, great. Yeah, she played this scene really, really beautifully, and well, I say beautifully, it was actually quite a harrowing scene. For anyone who's seen the film, she said, or who's going to see a closed play or has seen it already, there are some similar qualities. There's a scene, and she said, where you hear actual audio of Weinstein trying to lure an actress into a hotel room, and in this one, Chloe puts Krupa on stage, and you hear the voices of the CD producer trying to essentially, you know, yeah, do what sadly they do, which is sexually exploit her. And I remember sitting in my seat, and just the way that the scene played out and was written, and the way essentially the way it played out. I remember sitting in my seat going, "Oh my God, like this is," and I think it was a real insight into, and a visceral insight into, how some of these actresses sadly have been treated in those unfortunate moments. And that was a real, I think audiences are really going to take away that moment from the theatre and from your play. So tell me about that scene in particular. Where did it come from?
It was actually inspired by a true story, by a friend of mine, a man actually who had this happen to him. Because it's done through the guise of an acting exercise, which I think is another clever way that people get trapped into these things. Because you think, oh, I'm not going for a drink down the bar, or I'm not going to someone's hotel room. I'm actually doing an exercise with them, and they think I'm really good, and they're a great teacher, and that's another kind of guise that people can use. So it was inspired by something that actually happened to a friend of mine. But also, I have had, not with this particular methodology that's behind it, because I use a Meisner scene around it,
Mhm.
just to say I've had amazing Meisner teachers. I've also had experiences where I've done Meisner and I've felt like, I don't know, it doesn't quite work for me. But yeah, regardless of the methodology, I've had those moments where someone has kind of said, "Oh, you're really good at this. Let's work on this like privately, and I want to give you private tuition, and I think you could be really good." And yeah, then you get yourself in a situation where you realize it's just you and another person. You kind of sense that something is going wrong, or something isn't quite right. But at the same time, you're always told as an actor, just be open to things and, accept things. The whole yes and in improvisation. You can't say no, you can't block someone off. It's all yes and add to it. But I just wondered about that, because like part of me agrees you have to be open, but also like, no, fuck that. Like if something is,
Yeah.
I don't have to say yes all the time. Like, yeah, I'm just always interested by that mentality behind it, and this kind of toxic thinking almost in the industry around this show must go on, and you have to be professional, and you're not
Yeah.
open to things, you're not open to trying things, you're a bit too rigid and you're not going to learn. And yeah, that's where I feel like people can really come in and take advantage. Not always, but there's definitely room for that there. So that's where the idea came from all of these mixed match of stories. But I do love that scene as well, because I do
Mm.
think people can just recognize it, whether you're in the industry or not. It's like a workplace thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, hugely.
Um,
Yeah, it's not just subject to one, just this business. It's sadly it's universal in a way to many different things, and many people have got stories. And by all means, come forward and tell your story. Don't let this slide. Don't bottle it up, because this is serious. Because people can't do this. It's just inhumane. Um, yeah, and I suppose when you think about the audience, well, what you as the writer, and the creator of all this, how would you like your audiences to leave the theatre? What do you hope they leave thinking and feeling from your show?
I hope they leave with like lots of questions afterwards. I hope they like want to discuss things in the bar and be like, well, what did you think of that? And still kind of leave with all these things whirring around in their head, so that hopefully by the next day they might think about things completely differently to how they thought about things when they left the theatre.
Mhm.
I want to continue those conversations. I hope that at the end of the play, in a way, we don't come up with any answers as such. We're almost like passing the baton over to the audience and being like, what can we all together do? Like, this is the situation. We haven't solved anything by the end of the play, but this is what it is. And we're
Mm.
just bringing these issues to light. So I'd love for people to continue those conversations, be a bit more educated about what's going on, and hopefully encourage people to speak out more and to listen to those who have spoken out more as well, and what a big risk that is to take. I hope people feel empowered by it. Um, you know, there is it is a lot of the play, but I really do hope that people aren't completely defeated by the end of it. If they are, then I've done the wrong thing as a writer. I want people to think about things, but I want them to have a sense of empowerment and a sense of, you know what, we can do this, and there is hope there, but we really have to uh bolster ourselves and bolster each other and really have to make a difference, like,
Yeah.
because this can't continue. Something has to change, something's got to give.
Yeah.
I
It's
did
just,
a movie title there. Something's got to give.
somebody's got to give, exactly. Who are the good guys in this? Because, there's a lot of negative stuff about this. Have you encountered stories where, I suppose one in particular was, but Gwyneth Paltrow has talked about publicly on Howard Stern, was that Weinstein was made advances on her, and thankfully she escaped unharmed. So she told, wait, did I say the wrong name? I think I was supposed to say Brad Pitt for some reason. I think I said the wrong name there. But Brad Pitt was with Gwyneth Paltrow at the time, and she told him about this, and he confronted Harvey in a hotel room and said, if you ever make her feel uncomfortable again, I'll kill you. And and Brad Pitt actually is one of the good guys in this, and he sort of leveraged his own fame and his own career at that point to defend his girlfriend at the time. And
Yeah,
so,
it's an
yeah.
interesting one, Oliver, because there's that, but then like it's so hard to say because he also continued to work with Weinstein as well, and obviously later went out with Angelina Jolie, who was a big, again, someone who said do not work with Weinstein.
Mm.
Um, but it's just so hard. Like it's so
Yeah, it is.
nuanced, many grey areas. Is the thing. But I think if you can be an ally and you can stand up and yeah, if you're in a position where you are able to, and he was in a much better position to be able to do that, even though the fact Gwyneth Paltrow, she comes from like a big family within the industry, you'd think she has a lot of leverage, but even someone like her can really be swayed by Weinstein. But yeah, I think if you see any injustice happening and you're in a position where you're not, you might not be putting yourself at risk physically or anything, you can just speak out.
Yeah.
I think it makes such a difference, such a big difference, because you won't be the only one thinking that. Um, yeah, I think just don't accept it. I'm definitely in a position now where if something happens that I think is inappropriate, whether it's to me or to somebody else,
Yeah.
I just speak out about it. And it might mean that I don't work with them again because they choose not to work with me. But I mean, that's no loss to me anyway. But I don't believe in this whole blacklisting, that you'll get blacklisted. And I think that's just a power play. And
Yeah.
ultimately, what a lot of people are doing and what I'm hoping to do is kind of make my own industry, make my own little table. I'm not trying to get to this table that everybody's at because I know this table, I do not like it. And I don't want to be sat around the table with some of these people. So I'm
Mm.
going to make my own little table. And then hopefully, if we all do that and we make our own little tables, then yeah, we overthrow the big table
Yeah.
and yeah, incite some real change. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
real hard one.
It's a hard one. Yeah. Yeah. I say Brad Pitt was a good guy, and then he did continue to work with Weinstein, so maybe he's not so innocent. But yeah, interesting. These people. So yeah, tell
Yeah.
me. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think let's just draw a veil over that. I mean, we've really kind of done a lot of talking about the negative stuff, and I think we've made it very, very clear that, and you've done it very well in your play, that this is something that and I think good things are happening. I think we now, with plays like this, can enforce good things happening now. People are aware. People are more awake as such. and we can make a difference. And like you say, we don't need another 90 years for this. It just takes 90 minutes. Get them all out, lock them up. Just don't let
Yeah.
them see the light of day again. Whatever it is, just get rid of them. And we can make this industry a much better place. Speaking of tables, your own little table, or big table, sorry, Chloe Wade Productions Limited. If you obviously it's this play, then like you'll have future projects, I'm sure. Where do you want to take your table?
Oh, yes, that's a really good question. And it's so funny because I haven't really been able to think too far ahead after this play because I've been so immersed in everything.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I do want to hopefully continue making work that has some kind of political impact or some kind of leaves a bit of a social legacy behind it. I'm a big fan of Ken Loach and all the work that he does. You very much can see his politics on his sleeve, whether you agree with them or not. I
Mm.
kind of like the fact that I'm never questioning anything by the end of his films. I know what he's come out to say, and I love that. So something that can hopefully make a difference in the industry. There's this, I can't remember who said this quote, but theatre is a weapon. And I
Mm.
think that's so true. I do want to create work that really it might not be the theatre that people want to see, but it's the theatre that people should see.
Yeah.
So hopefully more of that and hopefully more empowering theatre that really tells stories that you don't often hear about, tells the story of the underdog or the little one, the little person out there. Um, yeah. And if you add in a bit of northernness to that, and a bit of feminism, then it's me all over that.
Yeah. Amazing. So whereabouts in the north are you from?
I'm from Huddersfield originally, West Yorkshire.
Huddersfield.
Field. Yeah, good old Yorkshire. But I've been down south now, so it's feels really bad, but I've been down south for about 10 years, but all my family is still up north. And honestly, the next chance I have to move up, if I could get more work up north, I would move back in a heartbeat. Like it is where my heart is. I love the north and I do love Huddersfield. Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Huddersfield. So interesting about how you've really hit the nail on the head with this play, and I think a lot of people, sometimes you do come to the theatre and it isn't exactly what you want to see, but sadly it is what you want to do. And I think I've asked the question on previous podcasts about is there a limit to theatre or art in general? How far can it go before people will just take a look at something and just go, I can't watch this anymore. I've got to leave. But I think at the same, and I'll be honest, I was an advocate of thinking there was a limit for a while. But having spoken to people and seeing your show and other things, I think theatre should keep going. Sometimes we have to show the dark reality. And I'm reminded of a film called Sound of Freedom. I don't know if you saw that. I can recommend it. It's funny enough. It's there's a message at the end of the film. I won't tell you what it's all about, but I'll tell you a little bit. So it was made 5 years ago, and it's all about child trafficking, which a lot of people think that there is a problem in Hollywood about, that there is a problem there. And the film was made 5 years ago. And well, actually, wait, let me just backtrack a second. This is very complicated. So Jim Caviezel's in it, who many of you might know was Jesus in The Passion of Christ, directed by Mel Gibson, who I think is a good guy, by the way. And it's all about he plays Tim Ballard, who was in the police, and his specific area was child trafficking and child exploitation. And the film was made 5 years ago, and it was due to be released, but the studio, I think it was Disney, said, no, you're not releasing it. We don't want you to release this film. And it took 5 years for them to get this film out, with every possible roadblock being thrown in the way. And it does make you ask these questions. Why did you not want this film to be released? Why did Disney say no? And it has thankfully been released, and I've seen it, and it's a hard watch, but it's worth watching, because it shines a light on the dark reality that is connected to Hollywood in a way. And there's something else we also need to stop as well. Like, you talk about innocence of young teenage girls, but innocence of a child, fucking hell, yeah, it's fucking horrible. But yeah, I can recommend it. It's on. You can buy it on rent it on YouTube now. Actually, it's just been released, so if anyone can watch it, go and watch it. Um, yeah, yeah, that's choked me up a little bit. But what are we talking about? Oh yeah, theatre. Yeah, so we need to keep going with this thing.
Yeah.
With yeah, and I
How
think
you
yeah,
Yeah, and I do think like that's our job and our role is to bring these stories to light. Um I know recently though in the news we've been talking about seen the Ralph Fiennes thing about trigger warnings. So I do think it's also our responsibility. We have a responsibility of care to the audience. If we are going to talk about these issues, to make sure the correct trigger warnings are there either on the
mm,
website copy or something like that, because I do think that's important.
mm,
Um I personally appreciate a trigger warning very much. I know obviously going into if talking about my play, a lot of people that we are going to bring in are women. That's probably the target audience, but a lot of the issues around that, we don't want to re-traumatize anyone. So we've just got to be so careful.
mm,
We do talk about these issues that the right kind of like safeguardings in place. And that's, me holding my hands up saying there's still so much more I can do as a theatre company to ensure that I don't re-traumatize anyone coming to see it. Like I'm still learning a lot about that, but I do think that's important, especially if we're gonna really advocate for these issues.
mm.
It's our responsibility to make sure everyone, yeah, everyone has that, I guess, that responsibility of care there for the audience. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they should be there. I don't necessarily agree with Rafe on that one. Um, but I think yeah, I think audiences should be aware of what they're getting into. There's a play I've spoken a lot about, which was A Little Life. I'm not sure if you went to see it or managed to see it at all.
I know a lot about it though. Yeah, I've heard great
Yeah,
things about A Little Life. Yeah.
yeah, it's a stunning piece, and I've been lucky enough to have a few people on the show talking about it. A couple of the actors as well, lovely people, really, really lovely people, were so open about their experience. And I remember I was lucky enough to get a ticket because it had sold out instantly, but I was lucky enough to find one. And in the program, they gave you a little bit of paper to say, look, if you are affected by any of these issues, here's a QR code that will take you to certain websites for you to seek help should you need it. And I think that's very important. I think you go to the theatre and you see these things, but I think it's important to say, look, we are dealing with this topic: sexual harassment,
Mm.
abuse, power struggles, people who are made to do things against their will in a way. So yeah, and so people are aware of it, and so the people can just literally take that deep breath and go, okay, right, let's face this, let's do this together. So yeah, so I think I'm an advocate for warnings. I think, or just little reminders, just so you know, it does deal with this thing. It does deal with it. But and then people go,
100%.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I'm a big fan of a good old trigger warning, definitely.
And it's all good. But I feel like we've really delved into this rabbit hole, and it's great. It's great to hear all the details and everything, and it's great. Just bringing it on a positive, a lighter note. What would you say was the best reaction you've had to this play that made you go, "I'm really proud of myself, and thank God I've written this, and it's taken time to do this." The best reaction.
I mean, I've just had so many lovely reactions after the show. It's very rare where I come out after a show, unless you've got friends and family there,
Yeah, of course.
where people, stay around and like chat to you about things. But I've had a few people hang around and just to come up and say, thank you so much for writing this. And it means a lot and telling me about sharing their experiences. That for me is worth everything. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to write the play. Is just from those little moments like that where someone makes the effort to come over and say this affected me in this way and thank you for writing it. um yeah, oh gosh, it just means so much. It means so much. And I've had so many like lovely things said from people. Kathy Burke came along to one of the shows
Oh well.
and tweeted it, yeah, and said very she called me very funny, not just funny, Oliver, very funny. And I was like, this is Kathy Burke. I mean, come on. What more could you want? Very funny. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that also night as well. So, yeah. I've been very lucky.
Yeah. I mean, if Kathy Burke says you're very funny, you take that. Yeah, absolutely.
Take it.
Take it all in.
Yeah.
Take a picture of it, screenshot, Instagram, Twitter. Look, Kathy Burke thinks I'm funny. As you,
Very funny.
yeah, absolutely. Very funny. Just got a few more questions for you, Chloe, and then I'll let you go because I know you're in the middle of a tour at the moment and probably you're high energy. You got to get your rest and all that. So just got your best of luck with the rest of the tour. I hope it all goes really, really well, and I'm sure it will. You've got a really, really great piece on your hands, and it was a privilege to review it as well as see it as well. So thank you for that. So I suppose I've asked you about what's next for your production company and stuff, but what's next, do you think, for this play? Well, what do you think is going to happen to it at the end of the tour? Or what would you
Oh,
like to
I don't know.
happen?
I'd love for it to be published. I'd love to
Yeah.
really get it out there in the world. I'd love for someone to come along to the show and be like, "Oh yeah, let's pick it up and we'll help finance, take it to Edinburgh or take it to the West End or somewhere like that." But like literally, I don't think I can do it on my own anymore. With I've got a lovely producer, Danica Corns, and we've just like spent so long trying to finance it, getting it on as a tour. So it'd be great if someone could just step in and be like, "You know what? We'll take the reins from here." And give it a further life. But ultimately, I just hope that I've had a few people reach out and ask to read the play afterwards. So I'd love to be able to just send it to places, send it to schools, drama schools, or like theatre, Amdram groups. I just love to keep um people keep reading it and people keep performing it and just seeing how different it can be. Yeah, I'd love for it to have a future life. I definitely, I'm not done with it by any means. Like, it's just, I might just have to take a break after this tour, but there's so much more that I do want to do with it.
Yeah, amazing. And I look forward to the future success of it. And it's really, really good. It's really, really good. So just final two questions for you, Chloe, today. First of all is, you've done this amazing plethora of work, acting, writing, theatre making, etc. But if we were to shoot back to the very beginning of your journey, so like not so much when you discovered acting and stuff like that, but when you started to work, when you were starting out, what would you say was a piece of advice that you wish you heard then that that would have propelled you on to that you wish you'd heard at the start of your career?
Mm. Oh, there's been a few goodies. Because I like trained in screen. I've been fortunate that I've always been able to, in a way, be able to watch myself back. I know a lot of people are really put off by seeing
Mm.
themselves
Yeah.
back, but someone once gave me the advice, which was, when you like go to a catwalk and you're looking at the clothes on the catwalk, you're not particularly looking at the model, you're looking at what she's wearing. And think about that when you're watching yourself. Like, think of the character, and no one's looking at you apart from you.
Mm.
Really just look at the character, try not to be vain about it. And that's been a really great piece of advice because I've managed to enjoy all that work that goes into a film, all those different departments, and to be able to sit and watch a film from beginning to end that you've been in, if it's small or large or whatever. Um, I think that's such a great thing to be able to do, to really appreciate the whole effort of work and not be like, oh, I can't watch it. And so I'd love, I now, don't get me wrong, I'm still like, oh, my face, oh, my voice, but at least I can sit through and appreciate the hard work that's gone into it. That was a good piece of advice. But I think the main thing is just gratitude and just be
Mm.
grateful because sometimes you tend to think, oh, why has this not happened for me yet? Or, why is this taking so long? And I'm so grateful to like be where I am now. If you would have told me 5 years ago this is what I'd be doing, I wouldn't believe you.
Mm.
But even now I'm just like, oh, well, why am I not why is the play not in the West End? It's like, shut up. You're on a tour. Like, be grateful. You've got an amazing company. So many people want to be in this position. Just be grateful for what you have. And like, I have a great family. I have a great support network. I have amazing friends. And the right role for you will not pass you by as well. I think that's another great piece of advice. Like, just keep being grateful for what you have. And then when you do get to the level that you want to get to, you've really worked hard to be there. If you had that now, where do you go? I have a
Mm.
friend who's done amazing things in their career, and he's a lot younger than me. And he said to me, "But what do I do now? Like, where do I go from here?" And I thought, "Oh, God, that's so sad." Like,
Mm.
he's in his 20s and he's achieved everything that he wanted to achieve. Whereas I'm nowhere near that. And that's something to look forward to, that hopefully when I do get to where I want to be, I really can know that I've earned it, I
Mm.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you
A few little
definitely.
bits there.
Eh?
A few little bits there for you,
Oh
not
no,
just one piece of advice.
no. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Honestly, no, that's amazing, and I'm sure well you've earned it already. But I can't wait to see what more you do with this, and what more plays you have in this brain of yours to keep coming out for us. I look forward to it. I tell you one thing. I just a little request from me. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but do you see a full length version of May I Take Your Order? Is there a potential for a full length version?
Yeah, I think so. I've always had in my head like a one woman show, but it would basically be around the different jobs that I worked alongside acting. So, yes, I could do one all in hospitality, but I mean, there's so many great, awful jobs that I've done, from like doing tour guiding on the boat and to what customers come up and say to you, to like do leafleting on the street. Oh my God, the amount of jobs I've done. And I feel like I could do a whole one woman show about it, but just jump from job to usher to this, to that, to that. Yeah, I think it's in there somewhere brewing, Oliver.
Yeah.
Watch this space.
Watch this space,
Mm.
guys. Watch this space. And finally, today, final question for every guest. Again, there's more than one answer to this. If you want to share more than one, what's been an experience or experiences you've had in your career up to this point that you're never ever going to forget?
Oh, gosh, that's a good one. I mean, that's really good. But there hasn't been like a standout, like major one. Like I feel lucky with every single job that I've done. I've always had those moments of like pinch me
Yeah.
moments. I mean, even again, don't get me wrong, the fact that Kathy Burke said very funny, I think is just I'm gonna get it written on my gravestone, for example. Um, and those moments that I was talking about earlier, when people just come up to you after a show, and it's happened to me. I did a short play of mine, and on the tube the next day, someone came and was like, "Did you do that play that I went to see at the Cockpit?" Little moments like that. I think it's more the little tiny ones, as opposed to this big moment when I met like my icon, or my someone said something really profound to me. It's
That's
actually
fine. That's
like,
fine.
yeah, it's actually more those little tiny moments that just happen, that I'm just like, oh wow, that's really funny. And that's not what I thought would have an impact on anyone at all. Or I didn't think someone would remember that, but they have. And
Yeah.
it's really surprised me. And it's just those little tiny things.
Hmm.
Yeah, keep me going.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what it's all about. Sometimes it's the little things that really, push you forward and you remember them. Fleeting moments, but they stay here for a long time. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's what I mean by that question. I mean, it's you don't have to have this huge moment like, oh my God, I met my idol or whatever it is. Again, it can just be about those little things. And it's always a joy to hear about that. So it's great that you've had those experiences, and of course, I'm sure there'll be many more. And yeah, amazing, cool, Chloe. Thank you so much. This has been a
thank you.
really no, thank you. This has been a really amazing talk to have. I know we've talked about some very deep stuff today, but it's important that we do, because these conversations need to keep going about all these facets of things that we will get rid of, and I'm sure Hollywood will get rid of them, and it will be a much cleaner place in the future. We hope and we pray for it too. But yeah, just thank you for your time. Thank you for everything. I know you're on tour at the moment, and your schedule is probably a bit crazy. But thank you for taking the time. And again, thank you for the play. It was a real privilege to review it as well as watch it. And yeah, I look forward to what more work you do in the future. I can't wait. So yeah, fantastic.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for coming to see the play and spreading the word, because honestly, having such great reviews has really helped us as a small company, be able to get bums on seats for the next ones. But honestly, I've loved chatting with you today. It's been such a nice time and break away from what I'm like usually doing. So thank you for having me.
No, my pleasure. Pleasure's all mine. And cool. So all that's left for me to say is, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast, and I'll be back very soon. If you just hang on, Chloe, we'll have a little debrief afterwards after I finish the recording. And yeah, thank you, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'll be back very soon. And thank you, as always, for tuning in. And yeah, Chloe, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you. Bye, guys.